you really have nailed the problem. Like, no matter how much we try and change, acceptable solutions, verification methods, it really does come down to who is holding the can, who's the underwriter. And I appreciate your answer there. It does clarify something I wanted to ask, so I won't do that. But since we are in this space talking about acceptable solutions, the method in which acceptable solutions are, in the meantime, when we have to use them, are worked out within the industry and participants has resulted in past clauses of the code. There's been a feeling that, and we've had a discussion about it already this morning with the minister, that certain parts of the country didn't get to have a good enough input that all of a sudden you have a clause change that it felt all of a sudden from the participants in the industry that there was an all of a sudden change to a building, a clause of the building code. How are you going to make sure that that doesn't happen when you go on to future clause reviews to make acceptable solutions are something that works with the industry in the state it was and the state we're trying to get to? And in particular, I'd like to hear you talk about G12 and what's going on in that space right now.
What's G12?
G12.
Can you please translate for those of us who don't speak?
So G12 is it's kind of like H1 for insulation standards. G12 is for plain hot water.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, man.
So, in terms of the first part of your question, so I mean, we do need to go out. I mean, there is some statutory things we need to do, and that includes going out to asking for public submissions, doing getting feedback. It's quite one of the other criticisms of the system actually is it's quite a long process to get change. But that's because there are a whole lot of things we need to do in terms of the other thing is looking at various different options, then going through the consultation period and all those sorts of things. So I can't speak specifically for I think it's probably H1 you're talking about. I can't talk specifically about the process through that, but I mean, we do put a lot of time and effort into trying to get out to the industry in various ways and get the messages out there and to councils and other people who have an interest. So we put actually a reasonable amount of effort into that.
So I think we've all heard this morning that there was a feeling in the industry and in communities that wasn't done to us to an acceptable manner. But whether you say it is or not, that's fine. How are you making sure that because I'm starting to hear rumblings about G12's proposed changes not reflecting the on the ground experience in the plumbing supply sector. How are you making sure that this doesn't get repeated again? Get a feeling of being for in the industry, get a feeling of being steamrolled, much like was reported post the changes to H1. How do you make sure that you're bringing people along with you and actually getting the best outcome for New Zealand? They're not wasting resources and skills and people coming into New Zealand with products that could solve problems. So I don't want to see the same discussion we had with H1 happen again with H12, and I don't know what clause you've got lined up for after H12, but the next one, like, how's that not going to happen again? What lessons did you learn from H1?
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Dave Gittins, I'm the manager of the Building Performance and Engineering, which is provides the technical background to the compliance documents we're talking about at H1 and that 18-month period where it was a transition period. So it was brought in so it was about a 5-year work program, and it wasn't actually completed it wasn't fully introduced until last year, end of last year, and that was an 18-month process that was brought in through. So look, it's a difficulty in trying to make sure we get, excuse me, everybody involved. And there is a little bit of a resilience of engaging in those technical documents until they hit the ground and become a practical manufacturing or construction methodology. So that's a constant issue we have to try and meet. We try and engage with all of the certified builders, registered master builders, the local groups as much as we can. So we do try and engage with them as much as possible. The G12, which is the hot water system, is that the settings? Is that the auto?
This is I'm just trying to take a bit of time here, but like the question I'm asking is, like, I grant you say there was an 18-month consultation, you did your best to get out, but the feeling and members around the table have expressed that they're hearing it from their communities. There was a feeling that H1 didn't take into, especially up in the north, for example, but even in the Bay of Plenty, where we have difference in climates, there was a feeling that this is not the best scenario, especially at the stage the building industry is in, to go and put a whole lot more cost on buildings that in a lot of cases, I mean, people would say maybe didn't need it, you might say they do, but that's not my question. My question is, how are you going to make sure that we don't have the same conversation after G12 that we're having after H1? Because you say we did 18 months of consultation, but people don't feel like it was like there was a sufficient process there. Like, are you making a change? Is there a review of the way this is done?
We follow the Building Act requirements of what consultation requires, and we do try and go out as much as possible. We have a email list of something over 6,000 participants in the construction industry and bodies that we email out and any changes, any updates that we can. We go on to talk to conferences, we go and engage with those on the ground as much as we can. I'm not sure what the G12 changes that.
So it's about the lead components and brass fittings.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's the
I
reduction.
mean, but it's not even it's more the, sorry. Sorry.
Go ahead. It's
Okay,
interesting.
carry on,
Yeah,
carry on.
it's fine.
We got an hour and a half.
All right.
Go for it.
It's not the engineering. I mean, you could say we're going to have triple glazing in Ohakuni, and that's great, maybe. But I'm thinking, like, I am trying to say, why was there such a feeling after the H1 changes were brought in that it was a blindside in the industry? Do you think?
That's a good question.
I think, apologies that I wasn't there at the time, but my view of it is probably we didn't engage sufficiently. Even, yes, you can follow the very, rules of something, and you can do the tick box of the exercise around engagement, and we probably did as much as we thought and we felt we had done. That doesn't mean to say we can't do better this time. It doesn't mean to say we aren't going to go back and think, what did we get wrong in this and what can we do better? The challenge for us will be, unfortunately, with all consultations, there will always be a group that may feel that we didn't reach them as well as we could have. And what our responsibility is to do is try and minimise that as much as possible. We would welcome any input from the committee or yourselves around do you see any obvious gaps that we may miss? I'm happy to come back and talk about that further. But yes, one of our things that we've actually done within MBIE is looking at around how do we do our engagement activities? How do we engage with the public? Not just in terms of engagement and consultation, but also in terms of information and education. How do we make sure that we are trying to get as close to the market and as close to the users and producers and the builders of the system that we can, with the resources that we have and in the time that we have available. So I appreciate that on that occasion we may have fallen short, but I can reassure you that one of the things I will definitely be asking as we go forward is, are we sure that we have got those lessons learned? But the team I know are always looking at those, which is probably why we don't answer as elegantly as we could, because to us it's second nature that we need to go back and look at the last thing we did and go, could we have done this better?
So you've done that. So you didn't talk about the manufacturer product. So when we have the G12 change proposed as I understand, there will be a lead-free component that needs to go in. But there really is such a there's not, it's only, from my understanding, New Zealand is proposing it. It's currently in Western Australia and South Australia.
I think it's across Australia.
Well, and which meant that it had to go across Australia, but the manufacturing in the world for those types of fittings isn't scalable. It's only because of Australia and New Zealand's joint standard. So my question is to say, are we going to end up with a higher price of plumbing fittings because we have a narrowed supply chain, because we've gone along with Australia and New Zealand standard, when perhaps the chemistry of our water makeup isn't comparable. So just because two states in Australia have it, now we've all got it. How are we going to make sure that do you take into account global supply chains when you're weighing off these things such as NZSAS standards?
We do. This is the short answer. So those changes to the reduction in lead in potable water fixtures and fittings and are aligned with the Australian change. We get most of our product, water supply product through the Indonesian, through Australia. We do have some local manufacturing as well, but it's a smaller part of the market. So we are aligned with Australia, and those changes are proposed to come in at the same time as the Australian.
Right, so you do line up. So then when it came to H1, there was a lot of ramp up in manufacturing that had to happen. All of a sudden, a lot of parts of the country had to go from 4x2 to 6x2 external framing when there was a bit of a shortage at the time. So my concern is that, we were having, at the time these changes started coming in, there was you turn up to places and there'd be no timber on the shelves. And then they had to change, Red Stag and Co had to change production to meet with H1 changes. Did you feel like you timed that change properly?
I think there was a lot of issues around that time of the change. It was also going through the COVID, post-COVID, and there was a lot of huge building construction increase and consenting, as we've talked about. So it was not a good alignment in terms of timeframes, that it was pushed out in the timeframes. I think it's only going to get into some of the technical detail. You don't actually need to go to 6x2 framing. You can use different methodologies. There's 3 different ways of compliance.
Yeah.
So there are different ways of doing that.